Okay, if I told you that I can offer you a Tesla Model Y brand new for $46,000, but instead you don't pay that full price, you're going to only pay $31,000. Would you believe me? And would you actually take the offer? Or would you call me a scammer and report me? Now, if you switch out Model Y Tesla with BYD and their models, apparently Chinese people are believing this crap. So how exactly does it go? Well, there's something new called a zero mileage secondhand cars in China. And yeah, it's actually insane. So I didn't expect to do another EV video after the last one to so quickly talk about it again. But you know, news comes and finds you sometimes. And this is the CEO and chair of Great Wall Motors. And he recently was in an interview where he exposed the current situation around the so-called zero mileage secondhand car. Essentially what it means is these factories, Chinese EVs especially, would produce a tremendous amount of cars, register it themselves as if they had been bought by an actual individual. And then what they will get is the subsidy from the Chinese government for owning an electric vehicle. Now, a few years ago, the subsidy amount was relatively higher. And so what these companies were doing was literally scamming the government for subsidy. So they didn't make money selling Chinese EVs. They were making money selling a quantity, and for every single one of these cars they produced, they made a certain percentage from the subsidy. What ended up happening was a lot of these cars, of course, they didn't get actually sold to people, ended up in storage, left in those EV parks, EV graveyards, and then they decided that they're going to offload the inventory to the secondhand market. So they sell it to the secondhand dealers for a very cheap price, and in turn, you're able to obtain a brand new zero mileage secondhand so-called car for a fraction of the price, something like 2/3 of the first-hand car price. Now this raises a huge problem because everything in China is problematic. So where did they cut the corners? And you're absolutely right for thinking this because they do cut the corners. And here's how. If their cars are made for the purpose of getting subsidy to make money off of that, then safety and other material costs can be reduced since, the car originally wasn't even going to be on the market anyways. But of course, these cars ended up in circulations in the second-hand market. So there's the safety concern. There's also the other one, which is faking the actual number of their sales. Now you have Geely, you have BYD, which constantly ranks top in the overall EV sales charts, even globally, right? Can we really believe this data? Because if what they're doing is buying up their own vehicle, essentially, not really buying it, but registering it as if it was sold, then those numbers are really, really, really fake. Okay, now they're calling BYD and other Chinese EVs the next Evergrande. So what happened to the whole real estate boom and then quickly explodes, the whole real estate bust that happened to Evergrande, Country Garden, these mega billion-dollar real estate developers in China where, they were once too big to fail because the government would go and bail them out. Well, they eventually did fail. So apparently now EVs in China are heading in this direction. So we'll talk about that in the second half. But first, let me just get the other David to announce something important. Dear China Insider viewers, this August, I'm heading to Forest City in Malaysia, a haunting symbol of China's real estate crisis. For a 7-day investigation, I'll be exploring the ghost city and speaking and interviewing with people in Malaysia and Singapore about the Chinese crisis in its real estate, politics, as well as the general perception in Southeast Asia. My goal is to expose the growing influence of the Chinese Communist Party there. Your support will make this journey possible, powering China Insider to deliver unfiltered and bold truth. So why am I going? Well, it's probably the only place outside of China where we can witness the entirety of the Belt and Road Initiative from its rise to the downfall, the decade of Xi Jinping's ambition, and possibly witness the beginning and the end of the CCP's economic might. I am once again asking for your financial support. Sorry, that was my best Bernie impersonation. But in all seriousness, by donating, you become the driving force behind our mission with China Insider going to Southeast Asia. And here is how you can join us. While we're so grateful for any amount of donation that you can provide to us for this journey, if you donate $15, you will receive a personalized thank you letter from me. By donating $35, you receive a personalized thank you letter from me and exclusive behind-the-scenes photos of this trip, which will capture moments you'll never see anywhere else. By donating $65, you will get a digital book packed with outtakes, unseen footage, and my personal reflection, offering a raw insider look into the ghost city and all of its former glory. It also includes all of the $35 tier donation rewards. And if you donate $100 or more, you will receive exclusive, never for sale merchandise from China Insider specifically tailored for this trip, which is a unique keepsake for our top supporters, plus all of the previous tier rewards. Your generosity will fund the equipment, travel, and production of this trip, and we just can't thank you enough for sticking with us for the journey so far, and we hope to bring you all of the best stories around China, and this trip definitely will be one that's worth remembering, so join us on the journey and donate today. All right, thank you to the other David. And once again, our next journey takes us to Singapore, takes us to Malaysia, and I hope to really investigate what's happening there with the ghost city. So check out the link in the description and consider offering a donation to our purpose today. Thank you so much. Okay, the problem is that you cannot badmouth BYD in China. Like a few years ago, when Huawei was the big hot cake, you weren't supposed to badmouth Huawei. Any criticisms, well, they defend it as it's a domestic brand. You have to deal with it. And so even if you have problems, it doesn't matter. Like my last episode, I explained how after sales of BYD is completely ridiculous and there's no such thing as recalls or lemon laws. Once that car is in your hand, it's your toy. So the issue here is that BYD as a state champion is being given a lot of support and a lot of help from the government. And the CCP is pushing this EV lane. So it makes every single company wants to hop on the trend, right? It used to be real estate, it used to be semiconductor, now it's EVs.
这那比亚迪的车主肯定很伤心，他的车自然放在这里，没人管，贴的大字，怎么办？我也是比亚迪车主。
This is a video of a BYD car that burned by itself, and then afterwards somebody wrote, "This car, BYD car burns, please do not approach," as a form of protest. But that's it. You cannot go and sue them. You cannot go and say something on social media. You can't really explain this whole situation to the outside world because, everybody and their Wall Street money advisor is telling you to invest in BYD. So the whole situation is they created this facade around the idea that BYD is the next big thing. But actually, everybody's setting it up to be a big Ponzi scheme like Evergrande was, like Country Garden was, and it's set up to fail. Because simply what happens with the Chinese real estate, 30% of its economy was in that, right? Well, for 2 decades, they were developing really well. They built and built and built, overbuilt, underperformed in terms of how many people actually use them. And then eventually they were so indebted that, well, they just suddenly exploded. And here's what's happening with the EV market too, is you have these parts suppliers or you have these direct OEM manufacturers that work with companies like BYD that don't really know their numbers are fake yet. So they keep supplying them despite knowing that BYD maybe is not making that much money on sales because their numbers aren't true. Then what happens? Well, they keep supplying them thinking that they're just continuing this huge export, huge ranking #1 trend of total sales or something like that without knowing that actually they're hopping onto a ship that's about to sink. But here's the greedy part, right? Chinese consumers, they see that these cars, might have been sitting in these EV graveyards. Here's one for the BYD one. Here's one for Geely. They don't care if that car, the thing is for the secondhand market, for the same price that you can get a brand new, like 0 mileage, basically completely new furnishing, nice interior, up-to-date stereo entertainment system, some automated driving system maybe for that price versus a secondhand Toyota Camry or a secondhand BMW M3 or something like that. I'm just randomly giving out model names. But you cannot get that for that price, right? So if you only want to spend this much money, well, your best option is to get a brand new car, even though you don't know or don't really care, but the price point, it's so attractive to people. So effectively it also destroyed the actual secondhand market in China because, well, the thing is, when you flood the market with so many of these things, the real secondhand cars, because the thing about secondhand is you can't call it a secondhand if it's never been driven before, right? So, well, big confusion, but still, that's what happening. So the secondhand market is also complaining about this. Other EV makers are complaining about it because essentially this is a competition amongst themselves to see who can best get more cars fake sold. Okay, but the core of this problem is the BYD structure. Here's a video of a BYD factory in Xi'an. Only 2 of its supply lines are still operating, so its real performance in terms of manufacturing the cars has slowed down a lot. But BYD, in essence, has been the model of the entire Chinese system, how they gave rise to their so-called export and manufacturing. It's built on cheap and essentially slave labor. So in one of the court filings from a worker that used to work for BYD in 2021, it was found that in 1 month, in October this was, he had worked 441.5 hours that year in October. And so that only netted him about $9,700, which if you do the conversion is like 1,200 USD. So he worked every single day for about 14 to 15 hours without taking a single day off in that entire month, only for him to net that much. So it's not a lot, right? And then you also have workers who are being let go, forced to resign in a situation where they sign open-ended contracts, right? So they can't just retire. But BYD is forcing people out over the age of 50. And specifically, what the funny thing is, BYD also works with a lot of these OEM manufacturers overseas, like in Europe, America, etc., that specifically have these a clause or some sort that say, they want to protect workers' rights and they can't be fired over their age. But BYD doesn't listen. BYD even produces things for the iPad, for Apple. So the entire model that they use is cheap labor, essentially slave labor, cheap exports, faking their data, make it look pretty for the Wall Street guys to see. It looks great on a Bloomberg article, but it's not how real life works. Back domestically, you just propagandize everything around the car, get everybody hyped up, get your crowd to not talk bad about it, and you have a win-win scenario. Rinse and repeat. Every industry that comes from here on, in the future, or have been in the past, have been exactly the same playbook that they've used to try to make this idea seem it's much bigger than it is. Tried it with DeepSeek. Now people find DeepSeek is so pointless, it's useless, it's bad because it's a copycat. So they're going to do this again with every single new industry. So in the end, it's a big fat lie, and I can't believe it took so long for people to realize it. Hey, getting exposed by your own peers in the industry is something probably pretty embarrassing. But anyways, that's it for today. Hope you enjoyed the content. If you did, leave a like, comment your thoughts on this topic, and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Until next time, bye-bye. And also check out our donation link if you want to support us for upcoming trip to Singapore and Malaysia. Thanks again. See you next time.